Well, ahead of last week, overs were the flavour of the month. The goals were flying in, and over 2.5 backers were in clover with their seasonal ROI very healthy. However, with 5 out of the 10 games on match week 5, providing 2 goals or fewer, level stakes unders bettors turned a profit. So there was a little regression, as someone warned that there might be. This is Betting Weekly Premier League show. You with myself, Dan Roebuck, while Nigel Seeley and Jack Wright are with me to highlight the best bets across week 6 of the EPL. Nigel, you did suggest with your memorable rhyme that unders were coming. What was the rhyme again? What was the rhyme again?
I'm not telling you because you actually said that you thought I made it up. So I'm not even going to say it. I'm not going to give you the credit.
Come on, tell us what it was. We'll have to remember it for next year.
Remember, goals go down in November. There you are. They go down. We've got 2 months to go.
They've come a little bit early. What did you make of the last weekend's action? I mean, we had the first 0-0, and after the 3 o'clock kickoffs on the Saturday UK time, suddenly it was a real unders fest, wasn't it?
Well, I managed to get home. That's the main thing because the unders come in. I managed.
You were swimming to safer waters.
I was swimming to Albania, thinking that I might be able to get a train from somewhere if the overs continued. So no, I managed to get back. So that was good. No, I mean, listen, it's one of those things, isn't it? It goes up and down, swings and roundabouts. The odds are there. I just think that the Lions get a little bit carried away. We saw in the Champions League as well. Will White was very successful going under 2.5 goals in 3 matches. Slightly different there because obviously they don't have the extra time that we're having now. But I just think, like all things, I think you just have to get in at the right time. And I think anyone who saw that, well, we spoke in week 1 and said about, do we think that the extra time that they would have in the injury time would have an effect? And I said, no chance at all. But it did. It actually did. So I think if anybody got in at week 1, week 2, when the market didn't really factor that in, well done. But now it's been factored in, and I think the unders is definitely the way to go. And you're going to see as the trend continues on today that I'm going to stick to my unders next. But anyway, I've had a bad couple of weeks, Dan. You know, not only with the unders was good for me, but on the picks here have been very, very poor from my stand. Only 1 from the last 2 weeks. But the man here, Jack's been getting me out of trouble. So I am a nice cold beer when I see him next time. So it's been tricky for me, but Jack has been getting the money of a sweep last week. Brilliant performance.
Yeah, indeed. 3 from 3 last week. There was 1 unders, there was 1 overs. There would have been more unders if it wasn't for those late goals, Jack, especially at Spurs and at Aston Villa. And of course, Villa did us all a favour going overs and winning the game.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of picking those games, isn't it? Ones where you do think that there is going to be likelihood of goals, and obviously the teams are going to still go for it right to the end, and others that you just have that feeling that a team can shut up shop and be able to defend. You need that, of course, for an unders. You do need a side that can defend, and we pinpointed Arsenal as a prime example, one against a weak attack, but also that they've got that solidity back. Which would help the unders there. And as I say, that was nice to cash as well. But pick and choose, get them right. And if we can clip the fact that Nigel's going to buy me a beer next time he sees me, that'd be fantastic.
I'm busy for the next year and a half. So.
Well, the unders versus overs battle will continue, of course. It's not quite Millwall Leeds. We won't get blokes jumping up and down on terraces, I don't think. But it'll be interesting to see if the trend one way or the other continues. Just before we get into the picks this week, just another question I'm going to throw at you, because there'll be a lot of bettors coming into the weekend play looking at teams that have played in European football. And you touched on it last week, Nigel. We've got 8 teams from the Premier League playing in Europe, Champions League, Europa League and Conference. We've only got 3 fixtures that have got teams that haven't been involved in continental action. I mean, where do you stand with that? Do you leave them alone? Do you wait? Do you take every single one individually? Is there any sort of trend? What do you think?
When you've got to give 3 picks in the Premier League, it's very hard to leave the teams that are on because you've just given the sort of the maths. I think you look at, and I've said since we started here, this is the top of the Premier League and the bottom of the Premier League is huge here. So when Manchester City are playing Nottingham Forest at home this week and they're minus 900 to win the match, I don't think it's going to have a massive effect. The trip for Man United to Burnley could be a difficult one after what was a massive game. Arsenal against Tottenham, that gives a slight advantage for Tottenham. So I think you have to look at the opponent as well as the team coming back. But obviously these clubs, Manchester City have won the treble last year. So they're used to playing back-to-back Champions League games. For teams not used to it, the likes of Newcastle, the likes of Brighton, who I've come on to, I mean, you would be probably slightly cautious of them, but I'm not so cautious on one of them. One of them I am, but the other one I'm not. So they feature in both of my two of my picks this week. So I think you have to look at the opponent. I think you have to look at the team involved. But I think, Arsenal, Tottenham, I think that gives a bit of an advantage to Tottenham. I know it was a 4-0 swagger really for Arsenal, but it was a big stage of the season. The first time they've been back in the Champions League for 10 years. And that would have taken a lot out of them. So, yes, I do. Especially teams travelling, teams who've been abroad and come back. So I think Manchester United would be the one that I would look at, and Newcastle would be the two teams that I would look at and be a little bit concerned if I was thinking about betting them at low prices.
We're recording this Thursday lunchtime UK, and you mentioned Arsenal. Mikel Arteta didn't really rotate at all, did he? And Jack, when you look at certain teams in the Europa League and the Conference League, it's very different to the Champions League because Liverpool will rotate. But we've seen with Unai Emery and Aston Villa, they might not, probably won't. They didn't in the qualifiers. So sometimes it's not just the travelling, but it's the teams that are put out by the managers.
Yeah, got to dig into the detail. As you say, it's all about each club's perspective on that. We saw it with Arsenal as a perfect example. PSV last year, they aborted admission, didn't they, in the Europa League, weren't interested. This time round, very serious, Champions League, different kettle of fish. So, all right, different stages of the season, but completely different mindset for the manager there. And Nigel's right. I'd certainly look at sides that aren't used to that kind of activity, playing on maybe a Thursday, then going into a weekend game, travelling away, coming back and having to play on a Saturday, possibly, having only got back late last night or even this morning. So those things certainly to bear in mind. One thing I've always looked at as far as how things are at the moment with the fixture congestion, which we had through kind of from the COVID time to the World Cup, and now with this international break, European football, and then straight into the Premier League again, it's always going to benefit those sides that have got the bigger squads with depth in them, with talent in them, that they can call off some amazing players off the bench or on the fringe of their squad that they can utilise either in those European fixtures or in the Premier League games that they're going to focus on to win.
Just one thing about Arsenal, though, Dan. Just one thing you say he didn't rotate the squad. He had the luxury of taking off a lot of important players after 60 minutes when the game was over. So, he took Saka off, he took Declan Rice off. He's 3-0 up in the Champions League game, 60 minutes to go. You got the North London derby the weekend. That's a great position to be in. If it was 0-0, we wouldn't be in that position. So, yes, he did go strong from the start, but he did have that luxury of being able to rest his key men. So they only probably played 60 minutes of sort of really not even 8 minutes of competitive football, really, when you think about it. So he did have that luxury of being able to rest those key players.
Talk about Arsenal a little bit more later on, because I'm going to get a very quick play from you on the North London derby before we sign off. But let's get into the official picks for this week. The show, incidentally, running around about 8% ROI this term. So if you're following us, you are making money. We're going to start with Luton Wolves here. Both, you will not be surprised to hear, are not in European football. Oh, Wolves a few years ago were. This is the 10 a.m. Eastern Saturday kickoff here. Luton are plus 245, Wolves plus 112. They've just been cut a little bit. Luton, of course, have lost all 4 games this season. Wolves 3 of 4. And if you look at the over versus unders here, Nigel, if you're backing overs, then you've been winning money on these two teams, but you are reverting to type here.
Yes, you would be making money, but then you'll be making money against teams that they've been up against who have been a lot better than them. I mean, these two sides are probably would be involved in a relegation battle, it's fair to say. I think Luton, definitely. Wolverhampton Wanderers, what I've seen so far this season, I don't think I disagree with one of Jack's pre-season bets that he thinks they're going to be relegated. And I think that is going to be the case. I mean, they played really well in the first match against Manchester United. Since then, they've gone backwards slightly to me. Luton have only scored 2 goals in the Premier League. They created a few chances, but they can't put the ball in the back of the net. And Wolves have always been an unders team for me, always, historically. I mean, they've lost some key players, from the midfield and their attacking ability. I'm not convinced by them. I've never really been convinced by them. I'm not really convinced by the manager. I think Gary O'Neill got off to a brilliant start last year at Bournemouth, and then he still lost his job. So that the Bournemouth board didn't obviously really fancy him, which seemed to be a bit of a shock. It was a very shock decision at the time. And this summer, it was because he got off to a good start. If Bournemouth have found themselves in what position that Wolves are in now, 1 win and 4 losses after 5. I think Gary O'Neill-White probably lost his job a lot earlier than he did. But I look at this match and I think this is now, if you look at the data, I mean, Wolves averaged 0.54 XG in their last match, which was second lowest in the Premier League. They don't concede many goals. They don't score many goals. They're involved in a 1-0 match against Manchester United, a 1-0 match against Everton. Luton have been involved in a 1-0 match against Fulham. So they are matches where they're in or around teams in the division. So Wolves against Everton is considered a relegation bout, was 1-0. Luton against Fulham, Luton, I think, I tell you what, that's a side that, there won't be a top 6 side. They've been mid-table to lower bottom half side. Another 1-0 match. If you look at the matches where these two sides have been matched against teams in the round, they've all come unders. So the stat where you go over is quite misleading, really, because you would expect them to be over in those matches. I think, given the way these two teams have started the campaign, 4 losses from 4 for Luton, 4 losses from 5 for Wolves, they have to steady the ship immediately. And I feel this will be a very close match. I can see going back to, I was going to go to my original bet that, I do for the last 2 years, Wolves to be a draw at half time, because I think the half time will be first half will be really cagey. I think it will open up in the second half. I would probably edge towards Wolves to win the match. I wouldn't bet them at the price, but I think they probably only win it 1-0, 2-0. Luton just aren't scoring goals. They haven't got a goal scorer in this level of football. That's going to really prove costly. Only 2 goals in 4 matches. Wolves have conceded a lot, 11, but they have been against much better teams than what the Luton are. And I can see this being a very, very nervy, edgy, close first half. Second half, edging it for Wolves. And they go for under 2.5 goals here. No surprise. Minus 103. 107, sorry. I think that's a decent bet here against 2 sides that are going to be involved in a relegation battle.
Yeah, just a shade shy of even money. And Jack, I know you're going to double up on this. Any more metrics that you can offer to persuade players to get with the unders?
It's more of the same, really, isn't it? Yeah, so exactly the same play for me on this one. I thought we might collide here, but we've got to go with it because it's again another tough round of fixtures, and this one's a standout. Luton were never going to come into this league and blow sides away. They didn't do it last season in the Championship, although they got promoted. They were very, very strong. 15 of their 24 home games went under 2.5 goals at home last season. That's 63%. And I say that's in a league that they were top 3 throughout the season and obviously ended up getting promoted out of. They haven't really got the firepower. They like to keep it nice and compact, nice and tight, go direct, utilize set plays and set pieces. And that's the way they'll try and scrap their way to a few points this season. It's been a bit of a stop-start campaign for them, obviously, because of the home ground being under reconstruction. So this is only their second home game. It's been on record saying that this is the place they're going to have to try and pick up the majority of their points. Gone are the days where 40 points is the kind of the target. It's a lot lower than that now. We look at the league table as it stands right now. 4 teams on 1 point or less. Obviously, Luton being that team on 0. And 6 sides that have only got 3 points or less. So that's 1 win. If Luton were to win this, they could go up to 15. So I agree with Nigel. It's going to be tight. It's going to be cagey. Neither of these sides definitely can afford to lose this one because there'll be massive pressure on both managers, both teams, if they don't get a point from this game at all. So for Luton, I suggest the season probably starts here. They've had, a bit of a stop-start campaign, but some tough games, Brighton and Chelsea in there as well. West Ham were in good form at the start of the season, came close against Fulham, but now Wolves, Everton, Burnley, the next 3 fixtures, they're going to have to pick up some points there, have some kind of foundation to build on. Rob Edwards has said there's been some progression from them. We haven't seen it by way of points yet, but these 2 sides did meet in the pre-season friendly, actually. And can you guess the score?
0-0.
0-0. There we go. Yeah.
Crikey.
So I just think, again, the lack of firepower on display. Wolves only scored 15 in the last 22 away games in the Premier League. So that shows you how powder puff they are. So I think both these sides will struggle to hit the back of the net. 1 goal could be enough to decide it. Wouldn't be a surprise to see neither of them on the score sheet.
I like 0-0 at half time as well, Danny. I like 0-0 at half time.
Yeah,
first half 0-0.
Big play.
Just on the Luton season from you both quickly. I mean, Jack, you mentioned there Everton away, Burnley at home after this Wolves fixture. I mean, if they don't get anything in the next 3, I mean, is that Derby record, unwanted record, coming quickly interview. I mean, they were 50-1 to get fewer than 11 points. I saw 50-1 at the start of the season. I mean, Nigel, Jack, what do you think on that? I mean, are they that bad? Are they Derby bad, Nigel?
I think they're the worst team in the Premier League we've had for many times. I think they're a great side, but I just think it's just too early for them, and the players just aren't good enough. It's so tough, and it's tougher now in the Premier League than it ever was. If you look at the current line now, it's 24 points for the season. That's what the current line is, and Sheffield United are 26 points, and that is 8 points adrift from all the other teams. So that
Do you know what? I'd be a Cellar at 24, Luton.
Yeah, well, there you go. You've got to go under 24.5. You can go under 24.5. So
What
I
do
don't
you
know.
think,
I
Jack?
think what you're going to do. I think you'll know. I mean, your fate will be found out in the next month, won't it?
Yeah. Well, Jack, as you just saying, those next 3 games, including the weekend. I mean, could they get less than 11?
I don't think they get less.
They
than
can.
that.
They can do, but I'd be surprised. I think there's enough bad sides in the league and sides that have off days that Luton will be able to pick up a few. Look, we've only seen them once at home. It was a narrow defeat to West Ham, who say started the season in good form. So they just need to get a foothold. They need a platform to build on, because they have got a way of playing which can cause a few teams problems. At Kenilworth Road, 10,000 sellout capacity. That's what I've got to work on. But these are the games they have to pick something up from, even if it is just a point, just to get off the mark, because obviously people are ramming that 11-point total down their throat already this season. So I think they'll go over that.
I just thought I'd join in. That's all.
Well, yeah.
I wouldn't bet. I wouldn't be. You're going to be. You're still going to get a very big price of getting that point.
Yeah.
They got to win.
It's going to be talked about.
Three matches. They've got to win 3 matches.
Yeah.
They could beat Sheffield United at home. You could beat them. They could beat Wolves this week, no problem.
I think Wolves will win this week, and I think they'll nick it 1-0. Luton are minus 500 to go down, and Wolves are plus 300. I know Jack put them up their bigger price start the season. Right, that's unders. Double stake time for Nigel and Jack then for the Luton Wolves game. Brighton, Bournemouth next up, Nigel. Brighton here are minus 250, Bournemouth plus 700. This is 9 a.m. on Sunday. Of course, really 8 a.m. on Sunday. I'll just check that because of Brighton's European involvement. Brighton are at home in Europe. Nigel, just before you get your play, would you be looking at this game and getting with Brighton if they'd have played away from home in Europe?
Probably not.
Is that a factor?
Big factor. If going to Greece, obviously Greeks is quite a way to go, and I think if they were playing this fixture away in Athens, I think it would be very, very different at home at the Amex. We know that Greek sides don't really travel well, so I expect Brighton to have quite a relatively easy night this evening. I think it'd be a great occasion. I think Brighton will edge it. We're obviously filming this on Thursday before that match. We don't know the team selection yet, but I would imagine that they will probably go quite strong. With some fringe players mixed in as well. But they've got a big squad, Brian. You don't realise how big their squad is. I mean, the likes of Billy Gilmore, there's some real good players in that squad. They're up there. They're underrated how many good players they have.
I mean, they were missing 1 or 2 when they beat United last week. So, just because they're names that we don't necessarily know, obviously the manager trusts them. Come on, then. What's the play here, Brighton, Bournemouth?
Well, I'm going to go with Brighton minus 1.5. I think Brighton will win this. I mean, quite convincingly. I think a lot of people would expect. I think there'd be a negative towards them. I think if you're going to play the 1.5, you'll get a bigger price come kickoff time. But I think now I'm going to go with Brighton minus 1.5 on the Asian handicap. So if they win by 2 goals or more, the reason why Brighton have played 5 this season, won 4. Every one of the 4 matches they've covered that handicap against Luton, against Newcastle, against Wolves. And obviously Manchester United as well. I think they'll do all right here. I think they'll cover that handicap pretty easily. If you look at Bournemouth, I think they're a side that are struggling. Their metrics aren't going at all well. When you consider the money they've been spending, I think they're a manager under pressure. We spoke about it. Is it Areola? Is that how you spell it? Is pronounced it?
Areola.
We spoke about him as a potential first casualty to be the manager being sacked. You're talking about a Bournemouth board that got rid of Gary O'Neill last year when he done an amazing job. That if they don't win this match, then he's under a bit of pressure. When you consider some of the matches coming up, then I think you might want to get a big price on them. They've got Arsenal, Everton, and Wolves and Burnley, so that really, really cement where they are. I think they're a club going backwards, Bournemouth. I think it's a good match for Brighton. The other reason I like this as well, and I know that Brighton are obviously very high on their analytics and their metrics. If you look at their matches that they play after some European games on the schedule. So they play Marseille in a couple of weeks' time. The following week, they play Liverpool. Then they play AEK away. They play Chelsea. And then they play Marseille again, and they play Arsenal. So, you know, you're talking about a Brighton side that want to push into the Champions League positions. There's a Brighton side that are much better than they were last year. The Brighton side that are getting the second most XG in the Premier League behind Manchester City. They want to grow, and I know how this side, the model that they use here, they'll look at this match and think we've got to win this match because we've got some really tough games after some tough visits in Europe. So I don't think there'll be any thought here that, you know, I think the team selection will be right for Thursday night. The team selection will be absolutely right for Bournemouth. And I always like Brighton when teams go toe-to-toe with them. If a side wants to play a bit of football against Brighton, I think Brighton will tear them to shreds. And Bournemouth will do that. They don't offer a massive physicality threat, Bournemouth. You know, they're not like Everton. When Everton played Brighton, Everton roughed them up and hit them on the counter-attack. Brighton don't like that. But when teams like Bournemouth will go there and play attractive football against them, they'll take them apart. They beat them twice last season. Didn't cover the handicap in one. One of them was 1-0, one of them was 2-0. But I think Brighton are a club, obviously, as we know, who are going onwards and upwards into the high echelons in European football, and you know they're a club that are pushing for Champions League places. Whereas Bournemouth, on what I've seen so far this season, with all the money they've spent, they are going backwards. And despite the Europa League match, I think Brighton will cover the handicap. If it was away, I would be worried about it. But I think with the tough fixture list they have after some European matches already, they cannot allow complacency. This is a club that want to win, want to go better than what they did last year, and I think that it'll be usual service and Brighton to cover the handicap.
All four of their wins, they've covered the handicap so far this season. Iraola is plus 1,300 to be the next coach to go. Bournemouth are plus 300 to go down. Let's go to Sheffield United, Newcastle, and also it is 9 a.m. Eastern, that game on Sunday. A little bit later on the Sunday, Sheffield United against Newcastle at 11:30. Sheffield United plus 550. They've been backed a little bit. Newcastle minus 205. They're still short price favourites. Here we've got selections from Jack and Nigel in this one. And Jack, off the back of that trip to Milan, it was such an occasion for Newcastle supporters. It looks like many bettors are going to be trying to take on Newcastle, and that's the angle in for you here.
It is, yeah. I was hoping that we were going to get a price where I could get on a nice handicap for Sheffield United. Sheffield United are a side that we mentioned your pre-season thoughts on teams and where you had to recalibrate maybe at the international break. And I've had to do that slightly with Sheffield United, I think. I think they're probably the most competitive of the newly promoted sides this season. When you look at their fixture list, they've had a tough run of games and they've been, that word, very competitive. So yeah, I've had a little tweak on where I expect them to be performing this season. And what I've got here is a handicap of plus 1.25 on the Asian handicap. So again, to explain that Asian handicaps, that means we get plus 1 with half our stake on it and plus 1.5 with the other half stake on it. So if Sheffield United only lose by 1 goal or draw or win this, then we will get at least half a win. Basically, the only way we can lose this is if Newcastle win by 2 or more goals, basically is the way to put it. So, and Sheffield United haven't lost by 2 or more goals so far this season, despite playing those tough games. They came very, very close last week, of course. I actually thought that they'd won. I was at a game, left it, and didn't realise there was quite so much injury time. And lo and behold, found out afterwards that they'd conceded very, very deep into that injury time. So they've been stewing on that this week. I know Higginbottom was very angry about kind of how that one went. So they've been working hard, and so they've had a full week to prepare, which is, of course, something that Newcastle haven't. They've had a massive week ahead. But for Sheffield United, as I said, only 1 point on the board with those 4 losses, but all by a single goal. And when you look at the sides they've played, they've gone to Forest away, which we know is a tough venue to go to. A narrow one goal defeat in that one. Manchester City at home came within a couple of minutes of getting a point there, but certainly covered this handicap as well. They got the draw with Everton at home, and then last week again Spurs away, another very, very tough venue to go, especially in Spurs' current form, and they more than stood their own. We know how they play. They look to sit deep. They look to keep it very compact. They look to keep it narrow so the balls get thrown into the box, which the big defenders can cope with. They look to hit teams on the break. They've got a very good structured setup, and it's working pretty well. And they'll look to do the same thing against Newcastle here for sure. As I said, Newcastle have had an absolutely massive week. It was a vital win for them last weekend via a penalty fairly late in the game against Brentford. And then, of course, they went to Milan, which was massive for the supporters as much as anything as well. But a great result, but not a great performance, to be fair. It was backs to the wall pretty much. XG is 0.19, one shot on target, which came very late in the day. Were dominated by Milan, who, if they could have finished a couple of their chances, we obviously would have taken the 3 points. But Newcastle will certainly take, and Eddie Howe will certainly take, going away to Milan and coming back with a point. So I think that it's a lot to ask of them to have done that, to then come back, and they've not been particularly good away from home either. Newcastle, no win in 5 in all competitions now away from home. So they've not been pulling up trees for a little while now in that respect. It's not been the best start to the season, certainly. They've not really been impressing too much, not really connecting going forward. Obviously, Isak looked dead on his feet in midweek, so you'd probably expect to see Callum Wilson come back into the side here. And again, a player like Wilson that you're relying on for his goals is a player that's not been too good as far as staying injury-free over the last few seasons. So these quick-fire games now will be a problem for him as well. So I just think, for me, I think this looks like a good opportunity to get on board with Sheffield United. I think they've gained confidence in the fact that they've gone to Tottenham, they've hosted Manchester City. They don't get much tougher than that. In fact, any tougher as far as Manchester City is concerned, and come away with good performances and close to picking up points in those games as well. So I think they'll have confidence. This is the Sunday afternoon game in the UK, live on TV over here. So the Bramall Lane crowd, we know they're vociferous. They'll get behind their side here. They're starting to see that they are competitive at the top level. And I think, as I say, with the big handicap on side here, we can even afford them to lose by a goal, and we'll still get half a stake profit.
Okay, that's the way we're going to play it on the Asian handicap. Nigel, you've gone for a simpler selection here, but one that is our biggest pick over the course of the weekend. You cash with Newcastle on the unders in midweek, I know, and you going in again to reinvest.
Not surprised the under 2.5 goals. I do agree with Jack, though. I think Sheffield's not got a chance here. I think they're a big price up just to win the match. I mean, it's 7-1, I think, to win the match. Yeah, I might have a very small bit of pizza money on it, 7-1. Sheffield United, they have been very, very unlucky in the Premier League. We've spoken about them. We were quite heavy on them for relegation. We're quite heavy on them to finish bottom of the table. But they've done all right. And their results haven't been nowhere near as bad as what they are. If you look at their results, they were outplayed by Crystal Palace in the first day of the season. But Nottingham Forest scored in the 95th minute to win that game 2-1, which was great for us. Sheffield United against at home to Manchester City, there was a goal in the 85th and 88th minute. That would have been an under 2.5 goal, easy. The Nottingham Forest game would have been an under 2.5 goals. The Everton one was the one that was just random. It was a random result. The Sheffield United Tottenham game last week, I mean, that was, you're betting under on that game. You're minus 100, minus 1,000, minus 10,000 to collect. And all of a sudden, Tottenham scored 2 goals in 98th and 98th and 99th minute. You've got 3 matches there of Sheffield United matches, which should have all cashed on unders. You would be looking at Sheffield United as an underside. This home crowd is a tough match for Newcastle after what was a terrible, terrible performance by them. And they did what they had to do, and that's what Eddie Howe does. I mean, talk of him becoming the next England manager. I'm a big England fan, as you guys know. I mean, I've been bored rigid with Gareth Southgate. If he becomes the England manager, God, we'd be like Greece when they won the Euros. 0-0 every single match. Oh, it would be absolutely terrible. But, I mean, it's a big time for Newcastle now because they're not doing much. Their league form is shocking. I mean, they've lost some big games. Man City, Liverpool, Brighton, they've lost some big games. Poor against Brentford. Away form is bad. They have Man City as well on Tuesday or Wednesday in the Carabao Cup, which might not be a big game. That might not people think of the Carabao Cup, but for Newcastle, they want to win the trophy, and they'll be well up to beating Man City. It's a good time to play Man City. Then they play Paris Saint-Germain. So this is a real time we'll know what Newcastle are about. And at the moment, I don't see anything in Newcastle that I'm quite impressed with. So I think Sheffield United got a chance, but I'm going to go for under 2.5 goals because Sheffield United do lack that killer threat in the Premier League. Newcastle away from home have been dreadful. The manager's a negative manager. This is a real tricky match for Newcastle. And if it wasn't for all those late goals, and hopefully I'm not cursing more late goals, there would be 3 matches that should they were heavy minus money favourites in play to be unders, and they were sort of diminished by a late goal or late goals on some occasion. But Sheffield United are doing all right. They're doing all right, and they're going to beat someone at a big price. And I think Newcastle will have a real tough match this weekend. So I agree with Jack. But I'm going to go under 2.5 goals at a very big plus 128. That does appear to me to be a big price, plus 128 here.
Yeah, it looks massive, that doesn't, because it's Eddie Howe's default positioning. It just be defensive. That's what he does, and he won't want to get beat in this game. It's going to be interesting to see how they tackle it. If you backed unders last season, Newcastle, every single home and away game, 6% return on investment. Jack, in our WhatsApp group, you said you got a corners bet, but you didn't want to put it in officially. We were waiting for an answer from Nigel, but Nigel's at the football and he didn't get back till about whatever time. So there you go. We didn't get an answer
in the
from
rain.
Nigel.
It's drenched. I mean, I was thinking to myself, I was coming home from that road, walking down that Holloway Road, thinking, what the hell am I doing? What am I doing this for? Rushing to get a train at 11:30. You know, in the rain, drenched through. Very quickly on your corners lean, Jack, if you've still got your metrics and your numbers, but be quick with it.
Yeah, I will be quick with it.
That's if you want to do it.
Yeah, no, I'll just let people know it's worth having a look at. I think Liverpool are a side that we know go full throttle at Anfield. They've obviously playing tonight as we record it, Thursday night. So it'll be interesting to check out the side tonight. I'm sure it'll be very highly rotated. But I think West Ham will be stubborn opponents, so therefore it will mean Liverpool will have to push for large parts of the game. If West Ham can nick an early goal, even better so. But just something that stood out to me was West Ham's corner figures away from home as far as their games are concerned. So Bournemouth, there was 14 corners. Chelsea at West Ham was 12. There was 21 at Brighton. There was 15 at Luton. And there was 15 West Ham versus Manchester City. And you can get on board here around about 10, over 10.5 corners. So that looks like a standout for a side like Liverpool, who we know can fire in quite a few themselves. They took 10 against Bournemouth alone. There was 12 in the game. And they were down to 10 men for the last half hour or so, weren't they? And the last home game, they had 10 when they took 7 against Aston Villa.
Just one thing about that, Dan. It's a great bet from the stats, but I would be quite worried if Trent Alexander-Arnold doesn't play, because he contributes a lot of Liverpool's corners.
I always think with Liverpool at home, if West Ham score first, that corners bet cashes without a 1,000,000%. It's the sort of thing we saw with that Bournemouth game, isn't it, really? But because of the amount of crosses that comes in, the amount that ricochet out for corners, it's been an interesting one team news-wise. That one. Best bets, you've only given us, Nigel's given us 3. Jack's only given us 2. Best bets, Nigel. What's your nap, as we say?
Do you know what? I've been poor the last 2 weeks, and they're getting away from it. I'm not very happy about the performance, and obviously I deserve criticism, which I'm getting, which is very nice. I don't mind. It's nice to wake up to being called all these names. I get it at home. I just go on Twitter to escape it. So I get it from my workplace. I get it from home. I get it from my parents, and now I get it from the people on Twitter, the followers on Twitter. Anyway, I deserve it. I'm very confident on both of them. I'm very confident Sheffield United, Newcastle under 2.5, and I'm very confident Luton, Wolves under 2.5. Worried about Brighton slightly because of the Europa League, but I think they'll cover. But the 2 unders, I'm equally as confident. You know.
Good stuff, Jack. Best bet.
Unders, Luton versus Wolves.
Cool. And if you had a free $10 bet on a North London derby, big game of the weekend, where's your money going, Nigel? You just seen Arsenal play.
I did a little breakdown on it. I mean, you can't really judge the Arsenal against PSV against Tottenham. You know, Tottenham scored at least 2 goals in every single game this season. The line is 3.5 on the total goals, so it shows you what we're expecting to see. We're expecting to see goals. I went through some matches, 57 matches since 2000 in this fixture, 186 goals, so average 3.26 goals per game, which is the highest of any pairing in the Premier League. When you consider it's a derby, when your derbies are usually low scoring and quite tight, you have to. Is that a pair of legs I just saw? You got a pair of shorts on there, Dan? You give me some stick with my shorts. Oh no, okay. Oh no! God, smell-o-vision.
Fans there. Enjoy that, everyone.
See that. Oh no. Anyway, bunions. See the bunions and all the bunions. Oh, perukas, all sorts. Oh no.
If you're listening to this on Spotify, you're bloody lucky.
Oh, you are very lucky. Oh, that was terrible. Put me right off my stride. Anyway, 57 matches, 186 goals, 3.26 goals per game. We expect goals, but when you see a line that's 3.5 and you expect goals, I always think, well, if it's going to go over, it's going to go over big. So if I was given a free bet, I'd go over 4.5 goals in the match.
Jack?
Similar theme, but I dug into some stats as well. Over 1.5 first half goals looks very interesting play here. Over the last 11 heads-to-heads, it's easy for me to say, across all venues, across all competitions, only one in the League Cup, so most of them in the league. We've seen the first goal scored on average in the 17th minute. So the last 11 seen 3 goals, 1, 1, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, and 2. So there's been at least 2 goals scored in the first half in all of the last 8 meetings between these two sides across all venues. So in this season, that's very similar as well. Arsenal's 4 home games have seen 2, 1 goal, 2 goals, and 3 goals. Spurs' 3 away games have seen 4 goals, 1 goal, and 3 goals. So that would be where mine would go, over 1.5 first half goals.
It's also one of those games as well, if you're betting in play, lots of turnarounds, lots of Spurs scoring first, Arsenal coming back, certainly at the Emirates as well. Watch out for that one. Plenty of markets, of course, in Bet Rivers. Nice to see the boys putting the best feet forward for a change. Nigel, Jack, thanks for your company. Good luck with your picks. That's a wrap for week 6. Betting Weekly Premier League show. Stay across all the selections and the content via @BecauseWeWin. From all of us, it is goodbye.